Welcome back. President Cyril Ramaphosa has authorized the deployment of over 2,000 soldiers to assist the police in the fight against crime in 5 provinces. The president says the troops in Gauteng will focus on assisting police with clamping down on illegal mining. The deployment has drawn criticism from some opposition parties, but what are the legal provisions and limitations the army has to comply with? For more, we are joined by Dr. Leonard Max, who's the former Western Cape Police Commissioner. Dr. Max, thank you so much for your time and a very good evening to you. And, before we even get to your opinion as a former police commissioner in the province of the Western Cape, what are those legal limitations that the SANDF will have to find themselves complying with in assisting the SAPS?
Thank you for the opportunity. Let me first commend the President to actually answering the call of the communities who are threatened by gangsterism in our societies in the various townships. First of all, the Constitution actually provides for the President to deploy the army in cooperation with the police in circumstances where it is necessary. Now, we are all aware that the president did so to address this particular threat. And for that particular reason, it is important to make known to the public what are the powers of the army. There are some analysts who states that the army got only civilian arrest powers, and that is wrong. In terms of the Army's National Defense Force Act 42 of 2002, Section 19 actually make it very clear that before the army is being deployed, the minister must issue a code of conduct, which they have to comply first. For more than that is in terms of Section 20. And that is when the army is deployed, they assume responsibilities in terms of the powers in terms of the Gatherings Act, the powers in terms of the Police Act, Section 13, the Criminal Procedures Act, the Transport Act, and the National Transport Act. In other words, they've got the same powers as the police in the circumstances as provided in those particular acts. They are for the purpose of deploying in the communities. They are officers of the law in army uniform. So that is not true that they don't have powers. The other point, which is very, very important, you will see the constitution reads that in cooperation, the army is being deployed in cooperation with the police, not necessarily in support. The old act talked about the support where the South African Police Service had to deploy a sergeant or a police officer with a section of the army. In this case, it is not necessary. They've got already the powers and they can execute arrests and they can execute searches and seizures if it is necessary without the police. And they stand under their own command and control, not under the police command and control. However, they will have a joint operational center, a JOC as we know it, and there the different commanders in charge of the operations, they will share information and they will plan together how to execute these operations. If the police work under their command, that is then an interim arrangement, but it is not in terms of the law, because the law in terms of Section 20 make it very clear that they stand under their own command. But furthermore, what is more important and what is more worrisome and concerning for our communities is the fact that before the army is so deployed, the Act is very complicit in terms of Section 20 and 20 subsection 11, that before the army is being deployed, they must undergo proper training in terms of inland security and policing, as well as they must be equipped accordingly. Now, the Act talk about must and not may. That means there is no room for discretion. So if the relevancy of this particular act is once the army is forced into a situation where they need to use force, their force must be in accordance with Section 49.2. That is not in the bush or is not war, they are within a community. And Section 49.2 of the Criminal Procedure Act make it very clear that once you use force, the onus is on the person who used that force to prove that that force was necessary, it was reasonable, and it was proportionate. Now, what I have seen so far with these recent deployments is that they only have R5 rifles. Now, in instances where you need to use force, but not deadly force, they don't have an alternative. And obviously, they are forced into use excessive force. And that means if somebody died, that the person who shot that person, the deceased, might be charged with murder, as well as the person who authorized this deployment and did not comply with Section 2011, subsection 11 of the National Defence Force
I
Act.
want to come in there, Dr. Max,
now,
because that analogy you're making is quite crucial as well, because it doesn't kind of put them in a circle, kind of chasing their tail, because for those officers, you're speaking of them only perhaps having R5s, or it seems that they only have R5s at the moment, which I assume is quite a higher caliber of a firearm. If they are now to use appropriate force when arresting people or running their operations, but they have mega rifles like R5s and they do not have anything lower than that to kind of ease the force, then is the onus really on the officer, because that's the equipment that they've been given?
Exactly. And that is why it was so necessary to explain to the community out there that those officers are not appropriately resourced. They are not resourced in terms of the Act. There's a violation of the Act. Even their common doctrine, the National Defence Common Doctrine, Volume 2, state very in particular what force needs to be used once they are being deployed within society. And they can only use deadly force once they receive a legal instruction from an officer, or when their lives are in danger, there's a threat to their lives. But let me go further. Once they assume this responsibility of police officers, that the limitations applicable to the police become relevant in the case of the SANDF members, which is being deployed in terms of Section 201(2) of the Constitution. First of all, they are compelled to comply with the Marikana Commission of recommendations, with the South African Human Rights Commission recommendations, as well as the panel of experts of the police recommendations, which states clearly, once you are being deployed in terms of controlling crowds, crowd control, and other policing activities, then obviously there must not be an automatic firearm present during those instances. Now, this is if there is an uproar somewhere, or a march or a riot, people protest against municipality poor services, and they have to act. They don't have the appropriate resources to deal with the situation. And that is critical, and that needs attention. The problem is, what I fear, the trust in the police is already at 22%. The people had their hope on the South African National Defence Force because they lost trust for various reasons in the South African Police Service. it is for corruption. They accuse the police of in cahoots with the criminals, etc. Now their hope is on the South African National Defence Force. Now they've got expectations. But if the South African National Defence Force is going to violate their human rights, they will also turn against the South African National Defence Force, and we will have a problem with legality as far as law enforcement in this country is concerned.
You know, as you're speaking about the trust being low in the police as well, and now that hope being moved over to the SANDF, we also do know that obviously this deployment of these soldiers is not a permanent solution. I think this particular operation, the president had said it'll run from March this year till March next year. But before we even talk about what happens after that, what's the solution after that, do you think we will be able to see a drop in crime and change of attitude, this attitude that we've been talking about toward law enforcement in this year of deployment?
Let me say that I think we will have, it depends how they are going to be deployed. They cannot be deployed 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's no presence of the SANDF during the night. Then they can't go home or to the barracks. They have to be deployed 24/7, similar to the South African Police Service. And I think the presence will only oppress the situation and not solve the situation. We would be able to have a stability in our communities, because you must understand that with each commission of a crime, there are three elements present. The first is an opportunity to commit a crime. The second, desire to commit a crime, and the ability to commit a crime. But police presence, as well as the NDF presence, only erase the opportunity temporary to commit a crime. So the desire or to commit a crime stay within that particular community, and that needs to be addressed, and that is not in the purview of the law enforcement agencies. But I just want to say that the Minister of Police, Minister Kachalia, Firoz Kachalia, he recently announced that there will be specialized units established similar to the PKTT, the Political Killing Stars team in KwaZulu-Natal, in the same concept with prosecutors, specialists who form part of that to address this organized crime phenomena in our country. Now, I think with that commitment of government in terms, and in particular, the President and Minister Kachalia, is that this will give them space to formalize those units properly, to resource them properly, and once the SANDF have to be withdraw, that unit is in place to continue with their objectives and to ensure that law and order is maintained in this country.
Dr. Max, you've given us much to think about as well, and also pointing out some of those loopholes. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Really appreciate your time. That, of course, was the former Western Cape Police Commissioner, Dr. Leonard Max.